Hello everybody, welcome back to Omens. I'm Ryan. AM air pronouns. As excitable as my birds apparently, since I keep knocking my desk around. Um, so it's once again third Sunday. So again, I'm going through to dive into something other than tarot, though I am gonna tie in a little bit of tarot. So today I'm going through an herb, a stone, a rune. And specifically, I'm going through a plant instead of an herb, particularly. Herb, stone, rune, and an astrological sign. So just given the way I've been doing it, our astrological sign for this month is Capricorn. Even though when this comes out, it'll be like the last week of Capricorn, bordering, well, more like the last few days of Capricorn. But, meh. Messed up the first time, haven't cared to fix it since. And I started this a little later to see if the birds would be a little bit calmer, but no go. I don't care. I'll just talk over them and yell at them on occasion. If you haven't gotten used to my birds by now, I don't know what you're doing. Alright. So let's dive into it. So Capricorn is the 10th sign of the zodiac, which means it also rules the 10th house of the natal charts, or of astrological charts. The 10th house corresponds to, you think I would have written that down, that was one of the things I'm going to write down, so we'll get to that later. Don't know why I'm trying to dive into 10th house when I haven't finished the sign. Okay, so Capricorn is ruled by the planet Saturn. Its dates are approximately 12/21, or December 21st to approximately around January 20th. It is a... I'm going to start using Louise Eddington's way of describing it. The feelings of the signs, so it's kind of a night or an exhale sign. It's receptive, young. It's one of the darker signs. You know, screw it. It's a feminine sign, which basically just means it's more receptive. It's a little bit sturdier. It's not so go-getting. It's more receiving. It's a cardinal earth sign. Hey, I'm talking here. Bobby's arguing with Gabriel. Yeah. So it's a cardinal sign, which means it starts a season. More specifically, it starts winter. I'm talking here. Calm down. So it's a cardinal sign, so it starts winter. So it's a starter sign in general. It's cardinal signs tend to get things going, be the idea people, be the, oh, what if we did this? What if we went over here? What if we changed that? Blah, blah, blah. They tend to be the starters. They're not too great at following through, but, hand raise over here. But they are really good at ideas and getting things started. That's why when it comes to modalities, you kind of need the other ones, because mutable signs finish stuff, fixed signs make sure you stick with stuff, cardinal signs just start new stuff. It's an earth sign, which means it's more grounded. It's it's kind of its traits. That's the word I'm looking for. Some of its traits are being more grounded, more stable, more because it is a cardinal sign. It's earth and kind of its let's get moving, let's build something. Build something mode. Its symbol is the sea goat. I'm sure you've probably seen a picture of, basically its upper half is a goat with the forelimbs and the head and torso of a goat, and from about mid-torso down is a long fish tail, like a mermaid tail. That usually has a circle in it, or a loop in it. And its glyph, which of course I did not have out here. Capricorn Glyph. Its glyph here kind of looks like an inn, except for the very last bit of the end kind of comes down, curls around. So, according to Louise Eddington's Complete Guide to Astrology, the glyph is kind of supposed to represent a hoof with a fishtail on the end of it. So you've got those aspects of both the fish and the goat. Capricorn also rules the skeletal system, and somewhere I saw the skin. I'm not sure on that one. But it rules the skeleton system, the bones, the teeth, the joints. People with Capricorn tend to need a lot more calcium in their system. If you go by medical astrology, I don't know much about medical astrology, but I do know that being a Libra, I'm apparently supposed to have more problems with my kidneys and hips, and my kidneys are definitely sensitive. If I get dehydrated, those are the first things that start getting pained up, start getting all kinds of pains, and that tells me, oh, I should probably drink more water. So I don't know enough about it to really say one way or another what I think on medical astrology, but it's like most everything. It seems to have some relevance. Most everything to do with craft, I should say, I guess, and astrology. It seems to have some pretty good relevance, but I don't know enough to say whether or not it might be some sort of bunk. Alright, so the metal of Capricorn is the same metal of Saturn, lead. And then Louise Eddington ascribes its gemstone as ruby. There's a few different stones. If you look up stones for Capricorn, you'll find all kinds of stuff, which I usually do. I just usually find the one that either speaks to me the most or the one that repeats the most. Well, actually a bit of both. Repeats the most and speaks to me the most. Which in this case today is Smoky Quartz. So, but we'll get to that later. Alright, so about Capricorns. Kind of one of their primary words or keywords is achieve, or I achieve is kind of the mantra, as what you could call it. Capricorns are very focused on achievement, on achieving their goals. They need self-trust and self-confidence, which is kind of where that fish part of them comes in, because that goat is striving forward, and that fish is a little bit more watery and emotional, and a little bit more, we've got our confidence, our trust in ourselves. They tend to be very responsible and determined in their lighter side. Shadow side of that can be, they can be a little bit more controlling and fearful, like, shit, I need to be, that micromanager type deal. That's kind of the shadow aspect of Capricorn, where they've got to be in control and hanging over your shoulder, and you're like, dude, just calm the fuck down, get out of my personal space. That's kind of the shadow side of Capricorn, and their more lighter, healthy expression. They're very, they're responsible and determined. It's like they've got everything they know they want to do, and they're working it. They're going for it. The mountain goat is, or the sea goat, it's like, one way I've heard it described, which I thought was very, kind of a beautiful way of seeing it, is in Capricorn, they're sea goat. So they come from the sea, from that ocean, from that depth of emotions, and that's where they begin, and then their work is to climb the mountain. So they rise out of the sea and up to the mountain. So their way of going is to constantly climb, achieve, go higher, be better, and do more, be more, which comes in them being very hardworking and law-abiding and work-focused, and whatever their work may be, or whatever their special interest may be. Whatever grabs their attention and that they want to become more in, that's what they focus on. That's what they go for. And honestly, now that I'm talking about it, a kind of an interesting example. So, I'm not a Capricorn. The only Capricorn in my chart is... Did you just hit me on the head? Rude. The only Capricorn in my chart is actually in my first house. So the first house is ruled by the sun, and... No, it's not ruled by the sun. Maybe it is. It's ruled by Aries. Which is Mars. But anyway, so the first house is kind of your ego, your self-expression, who you are and whatnot. Most of my first house is taken up by Capricorn. My chart's a little wonky with the Placidian houses. And some of it's just because I was born so far away from the equator, I believe, is how that works. But anyway, so you could take that, because with me, anything to do with self-improvement, to do with exploring myself, like I love personality tests, who you are quizzes, even the stupid little ones on Facebook that's like, what Santa Claus are you, or some sort of shit. It's like, those are fun. I love that stuff because that's one of my special interests. So Capricorn, with its focus and achievement, comes up in my first house of self. So that's where my focus and achievement is. Like, I want to know myself. I want to know more. Where I end up focused on is what I'm striving towards. And all my special interests somehow or another relate to exploring myself, exploring and growing myself. So Capricorn influence, to kind of pull it out of just its usual realm and apply it to somewhere else. So you can kind of do that in your own chart. Like, find out where Capricorn is in your chart, see what planets are in there, how that affects it. Like, mine's got Uranus and Neptune in there, so again, adds a little bit more daydreaminess with myself, which, yeah, I'm very much a daydreamer and rebel, which constantly breaking myself down and like, what new things can we discover and be? But anyway, back to this. Some of their strengths are being committed and their leadership qualities. They're cardinal signs. They're the first to go. They want to lead. They want to strive. They want to achieve. They're going first. Now, some of the halts with Capricorn, some of the stuff they've got to work through and over is often there can be an underlying layer of fear of never quite being enough. Of not doing well enough, of not going high enough, not being. There's that fear underneath, which that fear can become a driving force. I mean, one of the podcasts I listened to is Shadow Work Library, and I'm pretty sure I heard something similar to this off of there, but I can't remember exactly what episode or where or whatever. I only take what I want from it, because some of her stuff is a little too Christian focused for my particular taste, but meh. Anyway, but what she goes on to, what this podcast goes through is she talks about the shadows and how they can be turned into gifts. So, like in this case, that shadow of fear, that fear of never being enough, never being good enough, can be transformed into a gift of driving force, of going forward and striving. Now, however, there is such a thing as going too far with that, where like you're so afraid of not being good enough that you literally work yourself to the freaking bone. And then you're kind of just dead on your feet and not much help to yourself and probably not to many other people either. So that's probably something Capricorns need to kind of keep an eye out for, that they are taking care of themselves. And however they get reassurance of, you're doing good, you're not failing something or whatever. Like, if you know a Capricorn that's constantly trying to get ahead, it's like, first off, I'm going to be like, wow, they're really just go, go, go. It's like, probably ask them, hey, have you taken a break at all? Are you, like, healthy? In whatever way. So yeah, that's a bit about Capricorn suns. Capricorns in general and Capricorn suns. We'll also get on the rising sign in a second. Some famous Capricorn sun signs. Jeff Bezos, who we love but we hate, or something, or at least I do. I'm like, I love your company, but you're also a fucking dick. Elvis Presley, again, kind of a dick. because he stole a lot of black musicians' art and made it his own. Michelle Obama, I don't know much about her shadow side, so, you know, she's pretty cool. And Betty White, who I guess most people, I guess it's called standing now. I need to look up what that actually means. So yeah, those are some famous Capricorn sons: Jeff Bezos, Elvis Presley, Michelle Obama, Betty White. Yes. So, continuing on to that theme, we have Capricorn risings. So, your ascendant or your rising sign, which sign was coming up over the horizon when you were born. Capricorn risings tend to be the most ambitious of the zodiac signs, very serious and work-oriented, tend to have a dry sense of humor, and this is all from Louise Eddington's Complete Guide to Astrology, by the way. Their appearance tends to be a bit lean and angular with bright eyes. So the thing with appearance, I'm like, that's kind of very, very generalized. So I know, like, my Sagittarius rising, what she has for that, and you can go back to the Sagittarius episode last month if you want to hear. That's very accurate. But the Wildly Tarot podcast that I listened to, one of the podcasters is she has a Capricorn rising sign and a Capricorn moon. From what I've seen of her picture, she doesn't quite fit that specific description. Though I would say that one likely I'd have to look at a picture again. Bright eyes probably does come into it. The most I can think of right now is her. Their drawing of her. I'd have to look that up. Anyway, but where was I? Starting to wander off on a side quest. Okay, back to the main quest. So, but yeah, so that's why they tend to be general, is because not everybody fits every description exactly. Like I said, don't know enough about medical astrology to tell you why. Capricorn risings also tend to dress for success. They usually use an earthy colored palette of colors, you know, like browns, greens, olives, probably blacks and grays too. That's starting to drive me nuts. Once they start getting in a monotone, I'm like, change it up a bit. But yeah, earthy palettes. Most Capricorn's risings also, they might be considered to be cold or something, or unemotional. And it's not necessarily the case. They might just have a very hard time either getting in contact with their own emotions, or more likely just in general having a lot of trouble just showing emotions in general, because it's like, why should I? I've got this focus, this place to go. And again, if Capricorn's your rising sign, that also again falls kind of into your first house. So, like I said, my first house is huge, so I've got both Sagittarius, or the tail end of Sagittarius, plus like all of Capricorn in there, so I could fall a little bit into Capricorn rising, even though it's not exactly my rising sign, but it's still in the first house. So, like, lean and angular also describes me, as well as the Sagittarius is tall and rangy, so. Bright eyes, I don't know. I don't know what the hell bright eyes is technically even supposed to mean. I always thought that was more of a romanticized descriptor type deal. Because eyes reflect light. All of them. But anyway, and I definitely have difficulty showing emotions. So that's kind of a little bit. If you get now, Capricorn risings also may have had a difficult childhood where they were given a lot of responsibility. Not me. Difficult, yeah, a little bit. A lot of responsibility, hell no, I was a black sheep rebel. No way in hell my parents were giving me any sort of responsibility if they could avoid it. They tend to like security and to be the provider of their household, their family, friends, what have you. They like to be the one providing for everybody. I do that. There's often an undercurrent of fear again with not being enough, not giving enough type deal. And if you have Capricorn rising, your ruling planet is actually Saturn. So that's the other thing is your personal ruling planet is actually the ruling planet of your ascendant, not your sun. So my ruling planet isn't Venus, it's Jupiter. Which, not a whole lot of difference. They get along quite famously. Speaking of famously, famous Capricorn rising signs, Queen Elizabeth II, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, I don't know the correct way of putting that, sorry, British, I lost how to talk. Sorry to any British people or to Her Majesty. I think it's Her Majesty the Queen. I think that's how you say it. I'm American, I don't have monarchs. Could probably use a monarch, but I think we might have another revolution if that happens. We're already on the verge of one. Alright, Queen Elizabeth II. Jane Fonda, whose name I know, but for the life of me, I cannot, off the top of my head, remember who that is. But I know she's famous enough that somebody probably wants to slap me right now. So, that's it. Taylor Swift and Joseph Stalin. Those are two very different. But, again, rising signs. So, everybody's, even though these 4 people all have the same rising sign and the previous 4 all have the same sun sign, they're all very different people because natal charts are blueprints. And just because you have a couple of signs the same doesn't mean you're going to be at all the same. How those different energies come through in your particular mix is that's how I described it to one friend who's very about astrology. Comes to natal astrology, that's a basic blueprint. A blueprint is not a building. How that building actually ends up looking, like the paints and how this wall is actually shaped. I don't even know. I'm not an architect. It's slightly different, but yeah. Anyway, okay. Next part, Capricorn. The constellation Capricornus, or Capricorni. Capricorni, I think it is the other name for it. So Capricornus, which literally means either sea goat or the horned one of abundance. And we'll get into the myth on that because that's interesting. Not something you would ascribe to Capricorn most of. Well, I don't know. Not something you necessarily ascribe to Capricorn and Saturn because you know that workhorse driving force. Saturn, the ruler of boundaries and limitations. And it's like, what do you mean horned one of abundance? It's like, well, you gotta work to make stuff. Where was I? So it's located in the region that the ancients called the sea. I don't know which region exactly that is. It's probably in the Star Magic book that I have right here that I will read you from in a second. But, yeah. Capricornus comes from the Greek word caper, which means goat, and cornus. Did I write that right? Cornu, which means horn, so goat horn, basically. The constellation itself, the writings about the constellation itself, date back to the Babylonians, who pretty much just referred to the to the constellation as the goatfish. So, even though the constellation looks like kind of a really big V, they still, I guess, saw it as a goatfish or a sea goat, I guess. To the Arabs and Persians just called it goat. Romans aligned it with both Venus and Vesta. So Venus was seen to be right. The sea goat was basically her her ride. I don't know what to call it. I don't know what I know there's an actual word for it. But basically, she was seen to be riding the sea goat, and then Vesta, the sea goat, was under her protection. So Vesta, Venus, of course, the goddess of love and beauty, and harmony. What was it? Harmony? I don't remember. Love and beauty, a couple of keywords, and Vesta was the protector of home and hearth. So she also protected the sea goat. The Greeks associated it with Pan, the Greek god Pan. Blech. And that's where we're gonna start reading the mythos of it. So this is from Star Magic: The Wisdom of the Constellations for Pagans and Wiccans by Sandra Kynes, which, if you've been following, I've been reading this a lot. So, okay, it does not look like a V specifically. So the constellation, I thought I read somewhere it looked like a V. So that's the constellation. Looks kind of like a really wide V with the top across, so it's really odd looking isosceles triangle. Nah, really wide looking right triangle, I suppose. I can't remember the name of the triangle specifically. It's the one where it's got the really long diagonal side and the other two are straight with a 90-degree-ish angle. So, anyway. I don't know how in the world they made that look like a goat, or decided it did. You know what, I'm going to guess a lot of this was just literally, probably journeying or meditation. So according to legend, Pan was honored with a place in the sky for helping to rescue the Olympian gods during their war with the Titans. During the battle against Typhon, Pan eluded the monster by jumping into a river and turning the lower part of his body into that of a fish so he could swim faster. Another myth concerns the origin of the cornucopia or horn of plenty. This story tells how a goat owned by the nymph Amalthea suckled the infant Zeus. In gratitude, Zeus removed a horn from the goat and told Amalthea that it would provide her with anything she desired. Why would you do that to the poor goat? Eventually, the horn was passed along to the river god Achelos, who used it to replace one of his own that had broken. Achelos was usually described as a mixture of land and marine animals, so that's probably looks exactly like a sea goat, or give or take. Some of the magic you can use, magical interpretations and uses for Capricornus. Whenever Capricornus is in the sky, it is a good time to hold a drumming circle to honor Pan, male fertility, and the wildness of nature. If possible, hold the circle at the beach to emphasize the sea goat nature of Capricornus. In addition to marking the first harvest, Lunasaw is a time to celebrate summer's abundance. This constellation's association with the Horn of Plenty makes the energy of Capricornus ideal to incorporate into the Sabbath ritual. So, uniting the power of the sea and land, the sea goat personifies the spirit of summer. So even though Capricorn's zodiac sign is basically the start of winter, the actual constellation, due to the turning of seasons, the size of the constellations, actually comes up in the middle of summer. So basically during Cancer season, which is its opposing sign. So an interesting thing to use with zodiac is how the opposing signs influence one another. So we can see how, even though Capricorn is striving, hard work, climbing, and achievement, in the beginning of winter, when you're like basically buckling down, like for me in this season of Capricorn, I get very hermit-like. Like I have to go internally. When the sun's moving through Capricorn, I am very much inward focused on myself. I don't want to get up. I don't want to do stuff. I want to just either sleep, meditate, do my own internal work, what have you. So it's very much a sign of work. But because the constellation itself comes up in the middle of summer, that's where we can get that plenty, that its associations with the constellations associations with male virility, the horned god, summer, and the first harvest of plenty, Lunasaw, the first harvest, the horn of plenty and whatnot. So we can see kind of those two sides of those two different parts of it, those two different sides. It's like we're Cancer, we're at home, we're in our shell, we're crouching down. And actually, I think the constellation of Cancer might come up in the winter now that I'm wondering about it. But yeah, so we can see how, where did it go? Yeah, we can see how, I lost my train of thought, because I started looking through this. Of course I did. Yes, yeah, Cancer is actually, the constellation itself actually comes up in the winter seasons, the winter quarter of December, January, and February. Interesting. So even though, technically speaking, though we go off original or ancient zodiac wheel of the way, just because of the way the stars have actually turned, constellations are on opposite sides of their assigned seasons, which is fascinating. So Capricorn, the season of Capricorn, which is working hard and moving forward, we would more accurately assign that with summer than Cancer the Crab, which is kind of being very home-focused and internal-focused, which appears in the winter. I'm going to have to do some thinking on that. Okay. Now that we've gone off on that side rabbit trail for 30 minutes. Well, not all that specifically for 30 minutes, but anyway, moving on. So, as I said earlier, the crystal I picked for the Capricorn is Smoky Quartz, because it came up in more lists than some of the other ones. Well, it wasn't. Capricorn stones in general were all the different lists I could find. Like, some had that, like it was like 2 or 3 were on like 2 to 3 lists each, and then there were a bunch of other different ones. But Smoky Quartz was the one talking to me. So, and it kind of aligns more with the winter season, and Capricorn actually. So, Smoky Quartz. This is from the Crystal Bible by Judy Hall. By the way, that's what I use for my reference. Smoky Quartz is easily obtained worldwide. You can find it anywhere. I've picked up Smoky Quartz here off. Excuse me. Picked up quartz off the road, actually, and then Smoky Quartz. I'm pretty sure I have a couple pieces, but I was looking at them, and I'm not 100% sure if they actually are Smoky Quartz or if they're just so light that you can't really tell anyway, so I don't have an example. It's really easily obtained. It tends to, so Smoky Quartz looks like regular quartz, except for it's got a translucent, like, dark color, and that comes from the fact that it has, it's naturally irradiated while it's in the earth, while it's growing or whatever. It gets, like, actual radiation that causes it to darken and become kind of smoky and opulent. You can find some Smoky Quartz that is, like, really dark, sometimes even solid black. That stuff is usually, it's been manually irradiated, so basically companies was like, oh, this isn't dark enough, let me throw radiation at it. It is still technically Smoky Quartz, it's just, it's had a lot more radiation through it. So it might not be too good if you want to use it to kind of, one of the things you can use Smoky Quartz for health-wise is it can help assist in radiation treatments. The Crystal Bible recommends something with less radiation, less irradiation than, I don't know if that's a word, than more. So a man-made irradiated smoky quartz probably wouldn't be a good idea for it. So it is one of the most efficient. It's one of the most efficient vibration raising, grounding, and anchoring stones. So you can use it It's very good for meditation, to kind of ground, anchor, center yourself, and just keep yourself calm. While at the same time, because it's quartz, it does help raise your vibrations, levels, whatever. Help you get. It's very good at helping transition between alpha and beta brainwave states. Or, it protects and empowers both the base or the root chakra and the Earth Star chakra, which is the chakra below the feet. It grounds spiritual energy, gently neutralizes negative emotions and energies. So basically, if there's anything kind of negative around, it'll kind of draw it in, clear it out, disperse it. And because of that, it also assists in elimination and detoxification. So if you're feeling like, ugh, or you can hold some of that to kind of just help clear you out. Because of that, it's also useful for electromagnetic smog. So if you're feeling like you've been with like a lot of there are some other crystals that do this too, but like malachite, I think, is one of them. So if you're feeling like there's too much electronics going around, so maybe you know what, it'd probably be better than malachite. I still haven't done my experiment of trying something other than malachite for my computers, but because we do use quartz in actual we use it as actual electronics in our computers and technology to help. It's Pfizer, I think it's called, electronics. So what it does is, I can't remember the exact uses for it, but basically it'll help build up electronic signals. And what the quartz does, the Pfizer, I think it's called Pfizer. What it does is it pressures the quartz, like it squishes it down, and then the quartz will spring up, and that gives you a whole new electric running for, or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but they use it to kind of to run electricity. Plus, quartz is also really, really good. The reason we have such itty-bitty tiny microchips is because we found we can laser etch stuff on quartz to hold information, which Lemurian quartz crystals, or Lemurian seed crystals, are basically considered to be that. They're etched information from Lemuria in the striations of Lemurian seed crystals. So, all that to say, Smoky Quartz might be a very, very good crystal to use to kind of help clear out some of the electronic smog, all the smog you get from being like in your workspace, where you've got to have electronics around and you're working and whatnot. You can have some Smoky Quartz to kind of help clear that out. But more than likely, and somebody will have to do this and let me know. I'd assume because it is quartz and therefore used in electronics, it wouldn't mess with your electronics like, say, malachite likes to do with my computer. So that might be a fun experiment. I don't work with electronics on a regular basis, so that's why I'm not experimenting. But, you know, if somebody does, let me know, because that'd be cool to know if I could actually recommend that. Anyway, the other good reason it might be a good idea to have Smoky Quartz in your workspace is because it is also very much a strong stress reliever. Like, you can hold some Smoky Quartz in your hand and just breathe for a little bit, and it'll help relieve that tension. It'll help ground that stress, because stress is up. And so Smoky Quartz brings all that down, calms it, clears it, and such. So it's a very good stress reliever. And because it is also so grounding and anchoring and calming, you can use it in scrying. So when you're doing scrying work, you can hold Smoky Quartz or have it there, so it kind of like helps clear and calm. And so for the scrying, you can use it for basically it helps promote clear insight and neutralize the fear of failure because it's so calming, stress relieving, yada yada. Dissolves contradictions, promotes concentration, and clears the mind for meditation. So again, good scrying stone. Bleh. And then physically, like I said earlier, assists in radiation treatments. It also assists in the tolerance of stress. So everything is stressful in your environment, so you grab some quartz to kind of just ground yourself down and be able to work around all that stress. It also aids in pain relief and ailments of abdomen, hips, and legs. So, fun stuff. Alright, so that's quartz in 40 minutes. Well, 41. So let's move on to my herb, or more specifically in this case, a plant. Or a root. So I went ahead and picked beet. Beta vulgaris is the Latin name. I forget what it's called. Some of its folk names are mangal or mangold. Its gender is feminine, and that's mostly just because it's a root receptive plant. It's ruled by Saturn. Its element is earth, so again, elements of Capricorn. And its power, and this, well, I'll get to it. Its power is just love. So, all my information here is from two sources. Scott Cunningham's Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs, obviously, because I use that. So that's where I got the love, and it's literally all that it has on there for its power. And Wikipedia, because I was like, I should learn some more actual scientific information about these plants in specific, because that adds on to it. Adds on to our information. So some safety on it. Scott Cunningham said, put in his book, some of the safety is don't consume large amounts of the leaves internally. I assume it would just be kind of irritating because there's a few different types of beets that all fall under Beta vulgaris. We'll get into that, but chard is one of them, and you literally just eat the greens. I couldn't find anything as to why you wouldn't want to eat a lot of the leafy parts, but I mean, it'd probably just not be great digestively wise. I'm not sure why, but I know if we usually eat the root of something, then the leaves aren't usually that great. It's like, for example, rhubarb. You can eat the stalks of rhubarb, but you should not eat the leafy part because that is poisonous. So, I mean, if somebody knows why I couldn't find anything, but I'd assume probably just take it as fairly good information. If it's not really commonly made to eat the leaf part of a specific part of a plant, it's probably a reason why. The other safety tip for it, it's considered a high oxalate food, which are high oxalate foods, which are implicated in the formation of kidney stones. So it's not 100% set in stone type deal, but they've got a hunch that it could cause kidney stones. So keep that in mind. And eventually they may or may not find something else. The other kind of safety tip of it that is also part of its history, the beet was used in ancient Rome as part of treatments for fevers and constipation. So they'd use it as part of their the thing on Wikipedia said there were 5 recipes, and for soups for constipation, basically as laxatives, and 3 of them included beets as part of the ingredient list. So, a little bit of history / factoid / safety warning. It might get a little loose if you eat a lot of beets. Another thing with eating a lot of beets is there is a specific pigment in there that for the red ones that some people can't digest, so your urine may end up a little pink and or red. So you're freaking out over the fact that it looks like you're pissing blood. Ask yourself, have I eaten a lot of beets lately? If you haven't, go see a doctor. If you have, still probably a good idea to see a doctor, but, you know, let them know that, hey, I've also been eating a lot of beets, and I don't know if it might be that. But if that's literally your only symptom, it's probably just the beets. But don't take my advice. I'm not a medical personnel. Just anything that looks really freaking off, even if it turns out you just ate a shit ton of beets, go see your doctor if something's wrong. That's my medical air quotes advice. Because I don't want anybody suing me. Anyway, now that I've stuck my foot in my mouth, down my throat, and coming out the other end, let's move on. Again, with some of its history, it's a descendant of the sea beet, which grew along the Mediterranean coast, so that's why they tend to be rather alkaline. But they also do really well in salty earth, dirt, growing, whatever. Their earliest written mention, there's actually a lot of depictions of them from earlier times, but their earliest written mentions comes from the 8th century BCE Mesopotamia. Some of the uses of beets, there are a few different types of beets. So sugar beets are the most common used, are used to make table sugar, and that's one of the most common places we get sugar from. It's not all from... That's why you'll see sugar and cane sugar, like real cane sugar. That always kind of confused me. Now I know why. It's because a lot of our table sugar actually comes from sugar beets, not sugar cane. Which is kind of cool to know, and you know what? It's literally the exact same thing. Like, the sugar is the same thing from sugar beets and from sugar cane. It's the same sugar, just in case you're worried about that. It's literally the same thing. There is Mongol wurzel is a type of beet which is used for fodder. Chard, like I said earlier, is used as a leaf vegetable, and then beetroot is used as a root vegetable, and that's those big red beets. They also come in orange and white, apparently. Those are used as root vegetables, which means you can chop them up and use them cold in salads, or you can cook them up and use them as a hot food. Interesting factoid I found about them. One of the pigments they contain, indicaxanthin, prevents the breakdown in vitamin E. Alright, so that's all the interesting scientific stuff, or some of the scientific stuff I found on beets. Again, don't look to this for medical advice. Now, some of the magic it is associated with, literally the only thing I could find magical association-wise, anywhere besides Cunningham, which means the internet, aka Google, was as a substitute for blood, in blood magic. In Cunningham, got a little bit more. So like I said, the power he associates with it is love, which the way he comes at it from is you can use it as ink in love spells, the juice as ink in love spells. Or the little folklore thing he had, it was if two people eat of the same beet, they'll fall in love. I'm assuming he means like somebody takes a bite of a beet, gives it to the other person, they take another bite. That's the only way I could see that working, because we chop up the same beet, put it in our food, and feed it to different people, so they've technically eaten of the same beet. But, I mean, my sister and I ain't falling in love. Okay, that just sounded weird. But you see my point. I'm assuming he means like somebody grabs literally takes a bite like an apple, and then somebody else does the same with the exact same beet, which, ew, germs. Ew, germs. Ugh. But if that's your thing, go for it. However, in that case, I think it would have to literally be consensual. Yeah, if that's the case, why are you trying to force yourselves to fall in love with each other? What the hell? Allo-romantic people confuse me. I'll just leave it at that. But more common uses, the juice uses ink and love spells. Well, that's not a common use. Sorry. The more common use is to use the juice as a substitute for blood, like in blood magic spells or whatever. So if you can't get your hands on any king's root, which is another substitute for blood and blood spells, which is poisonous, use a beet. I mean, hell, have you ever chopped up a beet? All that juice does look like blood. It's not as thick as blood, but, you know. Yeah. So, but yeah, for magic-wise, beets, love, blood, that's about it. It's got a lot more interesting scientific stuff than it does magic stuff. Alright. So, last part of this, at 50 minutes, is the rune. And the rune that came out today, well, the second one, because the first one was like, I've already done this one, so give me something else, is in Germanic, Othila. So I have here, it's like a little, God, I don't know, a diamond with 2 legs. So it's Othila, which its Germanic name is Othila. Anglo-Saxon name is Ethel. It's phonetic. There's no Old Norse name. Its phonetic value is O, and its literal meaning is inherited land. It's basically the root of inheritance. So for this one, like so many others, I'm just going to read straight out of Leaves of Yggdrasil by Freya Aslan. And you get her updated book. However, in this one I was reading through it, and I was like, you know, I don't have to do this in sections. I can actually read this whole thing. There's no extra. So, the oldest literal meaning of this rune, passed down to us from the continental Germanic source, is noble. In this sense, it is directly related to the Anglo-Saxon word Athelin, meaning prince or noble. The German word Adel and the Dutch word Edel also mean noble, both derived from the same root. The god who is most obviously related to this rune is Odin. It is well established in literature from the Viking period that Odin was the god of nobility, whereas the thralls had recourse to Thor. Personally, I cannot entirely accept this association of Odin with a particular class. It was a later introduction instigated by the ruling classes, who misused this aspect of the religion to control the lower classes, as is usually done when a religion becomes powerfully established. In actual fact, Woden originally was worshipped as a god of the people, as emphasized in Chapter 5. The shape of Othila is a combination of Inguz and Gebel, and Othila can be interpreted as the gift of Ing, which probably explains why Othila has been related to the concept of inheritance by some modern commentators. By comparing the concept of inheritance to Inguz rune, the previous rune in this Futhark, it can be established that it is genetic material that is being inherited, at least on an occult level. On a material level, the meaning of Othila implies the inheritance of land and the rights to possession of that land. The right of Odal is still a legal right in Germania, and means that a person has the right to stay and live on an estate after the owner has died. Thus, the right of Odal stayed in that family until property was sold. Even then, it could be redeemed within a specific time, namely 20 years. The mystery of blood and soil are also part of this runic complex. Unfortunately, this mystery has been misrepresented by 20th century German politicians who had little knowledge of its real meaning. For the Anglo-Saxons, as for other nations in earlier times, the consecration of soil by shedding blood in battle to conquer that territory ensured their willingness to defend it against subsequent would-be invaders. The mutual interdependence of the land with the people who worked the land, and who were thus prepared to die on and for it in defense of their community or tribe, was the means by which the land was secured for future generations. This is how villages, communities, and even nations are gradually built up. On a higher level of interpretation, the mystery of blood and soil refers to the sacrificed king. In the Germanic tribal system, the king was believed to be descended from the gods, usually from Odin, but sometimes from Frey or Tyr. Furthermore, the king was seen as the bearer of the Haminja of his people. It was customary that when a king ran out of luck and could no longer guarantee prosperity and the power of fertility for the land, he was sacrificed. This was also the custom in some Mediterranean countries like Greece. The son became the next king if he was fit for office. If not, another member of the royal family would succeed to the throne. Therefore, the choice of the king's wife was considered especially important in light of the belief that the offspring would be the next to bear the Hamingja of the people and would inherit the king's luck and vital abilities such as courage and wisdom. In modern thought, this would of course be understood as the genetic inheritance referred to in the previous section on Ingles. We can thus conclude that it is of vital importance for the future of one's folk, and in consideration of one's responsibility towards one's ancestors, that any man or woman will most carefully considers the choice of spouse, who will be the father or mother of their children, and who will pass on their hamengja to the next generation. Of course, this theory by no means relates solely to the Northern European people. It holds equally true for all nations. Unfortunately, it has been denied any validity and has been swept under the carpet. It reemerged in a distorted form as racism or class division, and as such manifested itself as the Jungian shadow in the collective unconscious. The Othila rune represents the virtue of loyalty towards one's family, tribe, or village, and towards one's country. Loyalty, which is the most aptly expressed in the Icelandic sagas, is one of the traditional values in the social structure of the northern nations. Magically, the Othila rune can be used to invoke Odin in his aspect of wanderer and teacher. Odin has three main aspects ascribed to him. These are Odin, Vili, and Ve. These names correspond to his aspects of warrior, shaman, and wanderer, respectively. Besides being one of Odin's names, Ve also means sacred enclosure, which was that part of the hop or temple where only the officiating Gothar had access. It was the place where ritual regalia was kept. The Othila rune has been associated with an enclave by other rune workers, and an enclave invokes images of safety and protection. It is mythologically comparable to the walls of Asgard, which were built as protection against the giants. And then, so, if I got anything to say on that, I suppose would be more accurate. Oops, I lost it. So its traditional meaning is inherited land. Its literal meaning is noble. So we can infer from that that nobles were those who basically lived the land for a very long time. And one thing I have to think about is, or one thing I have to say is, the right to own your land that you've shed blood on type deal. Basically, you've conquered it in battle, so therefore you'll hold on to that against incoming conquerors. That just seems, whose blood is on top? Or even more likely is whose blood is on bottom. That's an interesting section to it. But I guess I don't have much to add on to that, especially since we're at 57 minutes. So for divination, some of its keywords associated with Othila are home, life, country, spiritual heritage, experience, foundation, fundamental values, establishing. So if it comes up in, if it comes up in a divination throw, it's probably something to do with your home or inheriting or your inheritance, your spiritual home, so on and so forth. In magic, the magical principle behind Othila is establishing, centering, and earthing a working down to the physical plane. It is used ritually to invoke its master Odin. Othila is beneficial in group workings as it creates a sense of belonging and togetherness. It is a powerful symbol to bind people together in a common aim and gives access to the group soul of the Northern European people. So Othila, from the sounds of it, is very much a structured family. It's a long ancestral family line. It's like everyone that comes into this group belongs to this group and is always going to be a part of this group type deal, whether it be a family, a community of, I don't know, a specific community that's not related by blood. Maybe even a long line of, say, a crafting tradition, like leather workers. That's one I can think of right off the top of my head. That's something like, say, for example, leather workers. That's a long line and ancestral tradition of people who have all done this same thing, and it's grown and built. And once you become one of them, you are now part of that group, part of that working. That's Othila. It has to do with, oops, took my bookmark out, whoops. Has to do with all that line, tradition, structure, or line, tradition, ancestry, home, not even necessarily so much, it's both the land you've inherited and the line you've inherited that you've become a part of, basically. Whether, so even those that conquer the land they come to, they've become part of that land. Their blood has spilled on top of those they conquered it from. So even though we can get into the whole, well, why did you steal it from them type deal, there's plenty for it more. That's a lot of different stuff, but just because that they have now spilled their blood and become part of that land, they've become part of that lineage, part of that line. It's like, now you're stuck here. Now you are part of this land, and now you must take care of it, and it will take care of you. And basically slowly get along. So if we wanted to put that in... Okay, I'm going to get really probably semi-controversial here for a second. So if we wanted to put that into context of colonizers in America, they did some shitty stuff. I am not going to excuse that at all. Don't get me wrong. So, but if we wanted to put that in kind of context of Othila. So these European conquerors, colonizers came in, committed acts of genocide and war against the indigenous people who were already living here on the land. So these indigenous people, through their the indigenous Americans, through their ancestral lines, have probably amongst themselves warred, taken land, spilled blood on that land, so that land is now theirs, and they have grown and worked with it and been part of it. So these colonizers come in and they conquer, and they spill the blood of those who were the owners of the land, and now because they've spilled their own blood to conquer this land, they now become part of that lineage of the land, of the place. So, not to excuse any of the horrible acts they did commit. How can I word this? What I'm specifically getting at here is to put it in context, is like, yes, they were outsiders, came in, conquered. That's a long European tradition, I believe. I don't know so much about indigenous people's practices of anything similar to that. But basically it comes into what their mindset probably was, is we've spilled blood to take this land, so now it's our land. So where the Othila part comes in is, the way I see it is, you don't own the land, you're not owned by the land. If that makes any sense. You've sacrificed part of yourself to become part of this land. And your responsibility and your duty is to now take care of that land and all those who have been there previous, which obviously we can tell colonizers did not do. They just kicked the indigenous people out. Fuckers. Where I think Othila would be getting at is what their actual responsibility should have been to do is to work with the indigenous people. Now, granted, all that history is a mess, and more than likely, because of the different clash of cultures, it probably would have just been straight warring back and forth. I'm not a historian, so I don't know 100%. This is where I'm trying to apply it in slightly more closer context to what we'd understand. Even though it's probably not 100%. But anyway, so yeah, that's Othila. I've gone and lost it. Nope, there it is. Okay. Found a spot. So that is everything. Okay. Whew. Well, that was fun, interesting, and informative. And I researched all this stuff before, and I still found it more informative as I'm talking. Love doing that. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so I don't know, y'all have a nice rest of your January. I'll see you next week for the Hierophants. Again, I'm Ryan. Omens. Like, comment, and subscribe below. Check out my links to my Facebook page and my Patreon if you're interested in supporting me. And yeah. If you got any questions that you don't want to DM me, you can email me at bagsandomens@gmail.com. Yeah, have a fun rest of your January, and I'll see y'all next week.